Hey everybody, welcome back to the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. I'm your host, Gordo Gambles, and welcome back to the full card breakdown. This time for UFC 308. We are over in Abu Dhabi for one of the most phenomenal pay-per-views we have seen in a very, very long time. Headlined by not only Whittaker and Chimaev, but Topuria versus Max Holloway in the main event. It should be a great card. I am very much looking forward to it. 13 bouts so far to talk about, and a lot of very good ones. I'm looking forward to this pay-per-view. Also, a birthday week for me as well, so hopefully going out there making some change and seeing one of my favorite fighters compete as well. All the stars are aligning to be a great card, and I am really looking forward to it. Quickly, before we get started, though, make sure to hit the like button down below, subscribe to the channel. This is an earlier card this weekend, so make sure you get everything going on this weekend, including checking out Coolbit in the description down below for my best bets, as well as checking out Established to Run for my premium DraftKings content. As always, going to go through the entire card from top to bottom, talking about betting, talking about DFS. I say we don't waste any more time. Let's get right into it. Get the fight night started with the 23-11 Bruno Silva versus the 23-7 Ismail Naurdiev. Naurdiev making his return to the UFC here, facing Blindado, a guy in Bruno Silva who has had some highs and lows inside the UFC, has fought a lot of very good level of competition, has fought closer with them. I mean, he's probably the guy who's tested Alex Pereira the most, aside from Izzy in the UFC, which is pretty funny there, but also guys had a lot of lows with his chin being hit, with him being controlled, and a guy who just seems to be relinquished to one of those power punchers who's able to go out there and fight a good fight. At 35 years old now, Bruno Silva is definitely not the biggest title threat at any time, but he's definitely a good contender in his division to have the ability to go out there, land that knockout shot at any time. He is very powerful. He does have very quick striking. He can be hit, and his chin has definitely been a concern recently, and he can also be taken down, but as long as his fight's on the feet, he is a threat. He's got solid volume, solid cardio, and he's a guy who I think is always there looking to finish the fight. Ismail Naurdiev making his return to the UFC. He went 2-2 last time, but that was as the younger prospect. Now he's coming back here after a couple wins in the regional scene, and it seems to be a guy's pretty killer to be killed. He himself also prefers to strike. He does have some decent attacks on the feet as well, but a guy who can mix in the ground game shot like you need to go there, but a guy who is maybe more fragile. He's finished a lot of these losses, not only been submitted, but also knocked out, and a guy who, although he has some good meat and potato striking, is also a pretty good power threat, is definitely not the biggest prospect in the world, and him re-signing him here right off the regional scene does not really indicate he's a star or anything to me. He's a guy who can compete in this middle range and will crush some cans if you give him to him, but still a guy who does have his flaws. When it comes to picking a winner in this one, although Bruno Silva's been untrustworthy, and I probably won't get there with my own money, he is still a guy I think I'm going to pick here. He is someone who has been fighting the better level of competition. He is someone who has good volume on the feet, and I don't think Naurdiev's style really has the ability to go out there and just dominate Bruno Silva. I don't think Naurdiev's going to go out there and blast takedowns for 15 minutes. So on the feet, although Naurdiev can land that knockout shot, I think Silva is landing or winning the exchanges until he does. I think Silva not only has power threat in his own way, but a guy who is able to go out there and be a striking threat, probably be on the front foot and potentially land that power shot. And I just think Silva's fought the better level of competition and will finally get one of these striking matches he really wants here. So not really the most confidence in the pick, but I am picking the dog here in Bruno Silva to get the night started. DraftKings-wise, this could have some decent implications. I mean, both these guys have knockout and finish upside. Naurdiev has been finished a bunch recently, so Silva does have that KO upside. I think Silva could go out there and score pretty well as a dog price, but Naurdiev, although I'm not the biggest fan of him, has a breakable opponent in front of him. Someone who can be taken down, someone who can be submitted, but someone who can also be knocked out in the feet as well. So the path to victory are there for both fighters. I think they're fine mid-range GBP guys. I'm not going to go out there and force them into any lineups, but I will definitely have an exposure to them just because I do think they have high ceilings in this one here. However, give me Silva to get the night started. We then move on to the 11-0 Rafael Cerquiera versus the 13-1 Ibo Aslan, another light heavyweight just banger. Let's put it that way. This fight is definitely one that is expected to end inside the distance. Both these guys are finishers. In fact, only one decision in 25 fights for these two guys combined. They're definitely guys who want to go out there, especially Ibo Aslan, and look to land the powerful shots. That kind of what Ibo Aslan is. He's a solid striker who wants to go out there and blast power. He blitzes forward. He has a ton of power in those hooks. Decent kicking opportunities as well, but doesn't really want to grapple. Doesn't have the best minute-winning optics. Doesn't have the most volume out there, and his cardio is definitely a question. Rafael Cerquiera is a guy who's a bit harder to find tape on. I have liked what I've seen from him, but has fought a very low level of competition. But a very big fighter who typically fights at heavyweight, now going down to light heavyweight, who wants to go out there and just throw the kitchen sink at you. He also throws a bunch of spinning stuff. He has good power on the feet as well. He does have a solid ground game, shall he get there. And I do think that is probably his path here in what should be a very dynamic affair. I think if we compare these two straight up, I see Cerquiera as the better grappler. I see him with the better volume minute winner. And I think that picking him is definitely fair. And although I haven't seen enough from me to be completely certain of this, I'm not really liking what I'm seeing against his lower level of competition on the feet, and I do think that finally getting the step up in competition and facing a guy like Ibo Aslan is a pretty tall task, and I have picked Ibo Aslan's last two fights here, and I think I'm going to do it a third time in the road here. Although it's another pretty low confidence pick, I do think Ibo Aslan has the opportunity to go forward, land the powerful shots. Cerquiera does keep his hands pretty low from the small sample size I have seen. And it's going to be a big step up against a guy who does throw very, very hard. I think Ibo Aslan's also pretty durable on the feet as well. So if they're going to go out there and stand and bang, I favor a guy in Ibo Aslan to land the more powerful shots. Now, if he gets to the mat or if he gets extended, you probably favor a guy like Cerquiera. But I do think Ibo Aslan's going to have his opportunity to land heavy early on. And I pick him to win by first round knockout. It should be a very, very fun fight for as long as it lasts. But DraftKings, one of my favorite fights to target. Completely in this mid-range, 8.2, 8K. Ibo Aslan scored 85 last time, which isn't the best, but does have a ton of knockout power in the early rounds. Round 1 KO threat, knockdown upside, and has been the best level of competition that Cerquiera ever fought, where Cerquiera does have power in his own right. I think he has a clear grappling path to victory in a fight that is expected to end so early. I do think this is one that scores very well on DraftKings. I lean towards Ibo Aslan's side, but we'll definitely have a fair share of Cerquiera as well. Give me the last Ottoman here in Ibo Aslan to get it done. But I'm definitely excited to see what Cerquiera brings to the table here at this 205 division. Next up, we have the 23-2-1 Renat Fakretdinov versus the 21-5 Carlos Leal in a short notice replacement here for Leal. Fakretdinov was supposed to go out there and face Nzechukwu and now gets a short notice replacement. Shout out to Carlos Leal for filling on this fight, a guy who was a PFL fighter who has, I think, was scheduled to fight and is taking this on short notice, but definitely was in camp for it. But he definitely gets a tall task. Renat Fakretdinov is a phenomenal wrestler. He goes out there, shoots takedowns at a very, very high clip. Has landed 5 more takedowns in 3 of his 5 fights, and one of the ones he didn't was a early first round sub over Kevin Lee. So definitely has a ton of upside in his style. Is one of those control wrestlers, able to control Brian Battle pretty easily. Very good top position and very good ability to spam those takedowns till he gets it. Not the biggest power threat in the feet. Is definitely a guy who wants to utilize his shots in the feet to get it down to the mat, and someone whose cardio has held up, but is definitely breakable. I mean, Dalby and Elizabeth and Zaleski dos Santos really put it to him, and that really put some question marks behind it. But when he's a guy in top position, he's definitely able to wrestle for 15 minutes. Carlos Leal seems to be more of a power puncher. 10 of his 21 wins coming by knockout. A guy who will definitely want to keep this one on the feet here. I think I favor him as the better striker of the two, and someone whose path to victory typically relies on the lane of that power shot. Can he get it? Potentially here, but I think more times than not, I have to go with the guy originally on the card here, Fakretdinov, to go out there and land those takedowns. I haven't seen Leal defend takedowns at too high of a clip so far, and I think Fakretdinov is going to be a huge test to see if he's able to do that. Fakretdinov's wrestling, his pace, his consistent pressure from top position is something that I think is able to allow him to establish top control here and land a bunch of takedowns towards a decision victory. I don't think Leal is bad by any means, but I think the difference on the ground is far too wide. Additionally, the chin seems to hold up for Fakretdinov on the feet, so even if Leal is able to land that shot in the small sample size they have on the feet, I think Fakretdinov continues to go forward and lands those takedowns. So give me Renat Fakretdinov. On DraftKings, we do have ourselves a decent salary here, 8.9K for Renat Fakretdinov, who definitely has my attention. He averages 107 DraftKings points and really has scored very, very well. His first 3 fights, 108, 129, 130, has fallen off a bit recently, but definitely has a guy in front of him who is there to be taken down, to which Fakretdinov can go out there and land those takedowns, and I do think he has a very, very high ceiling this week. I love him in cash. I do think he gets those takedowns. I do think he wins this fight, so at 8.9K, one of my favorite plays on the slate, I do think he's able to go out there and get it done. Leal does have probably some KO upside, but I just don't think he wins. So I'd rather some other people in this bottom range and stick with Fakretdinov up top. Give me Fakretdinov to win. Give me him on DraftKings. It should be a fun fight. Next up, we have the 12-0 Farid Basharat versus the 25-4 Victor Hugo. Another very interesting fight, but another very large favorite here. Victor Hugo is a guy whose nickname is Striker, but is more known for his ground game. He's got very good operating instincts grappling. He's got that nice knee bar on the Contender Series, and always is someone who is dangerous in those exchanges. On the feet, does throw with power, and is probably able to go out there and land those big shots, but seems more like a moment winner. He doesn't necessarily have the best volume output style. He can definitely be broken down the stretch. He can definitely be there to be hit as well. And that's definitely a problem against someone like Farid Basharat, who is so steady. Basharat is very good defensively. He's just very, very well rounded. And although it's maybe not the most exciting style at all times, he's got a great ground game. He's got phenomenal kicks and distance management on the feet, and he's pretty defensively sound. So in a fight like this, I completely understand with Basharat being the favorite. Not only do I think he'll have the better striking, better volume, better minute winning on the feet, but I think he can land takedowns and secure top position against someone like Victor Hugo, as well as have the better cardio to do it for 15 minutes. Now, Hugo is dangerous in those grappling exchanges, but Basharat seems to be sound enough to be able to hold his own down there, and I am picking Basharat to win. Victor Hugo is definitely a more fun and entertaining fighter, and I am cheering for the guy, but I do think Basharat is a bit too much for him right now. I think Basharat is just too well-rounded, too defensively sound, and is able to go out there and get this fight done. On DraftKings at 9.6K, he definitely has some upside. I mean, he did score 111 against Rodriguez there and definitely has a ground path to victory, but I'm not smashing him to every lineup. I think there are better plays on this slate. Basharat is a guy who is content to go out there and win from range, and Hugo is someone who won't necessarily go out there and accept bottom position. So it's very likely we see either a decision win for Basharat with control time or with his distance management on the feet, which doesn't necessarily score enough to meet his price tag at 9.6K. I prefer a Fakretdinov who has clear grappling upside, Orolbai, who we'll talk about later. So I think Basharat's a fine play. I think he wins at a high clip. I do think he has some wrestling upside, so I want to have some exposure to him in large field tournament, but not a guy I'm smashing a single entry. And I do think there are better plays in the slate. However, I do think Basharat gets it done. Give me a free Basharat. I think he gets it done by decision. And next up, another large favorite here, 12-5 Kennedy Nzechukwu versus the 23-8 Chris Huggy Bear Barnett. I love Chris Barnett. Let's put it out there. 5'9" heavyweight, doing spinning stuff, doing those dance moves. Everyone loves him, right? But this man's a tough fighter to go out there and break down. He's not the best minute winner. His cardio's not the best. He can be taken down. He can be held against the cage. His size is definitely an issue against him. He's probably slower to the punch than most. And I don't want to be too negative because the guy is fun to watch. The guy does have some good spinning attacks, and he is powerful enough and quick enough to beat this lower level of competition, but it's hard to pick him against these UFC level guys. Kennedy Nzechukwu making the climb up to heavyweight here, we typically see him at 205, is funny because not only is he a typical light heavyweight, but a guy who is moving up, but will still be the much larger fighter here. 8 inches taller and 8 inches more of reach. Kennedy Nzechukwu is a big fighter, and I honestly think this move up to heavyweight might serve him pretty well. Kennedy Nzechukwu is a very good, solid range fighter. I think he's got very good power on the feet, very good volume, decent cardio to go 15 minutes as well, and has shown wrestling in some fights. His durability is the big question mark because he's pretty resilient. He's able to go out there and absorb a lot of damage from Allberg, but then other fights he just gets knocked out. We don't really know what to see from him. But I think a lot of people have a sour taste in their mouth from that last fight against OSP. I completely get it. At the end of the day, this fighter is still pretty good. He's got good range, he's got good power, and he does have the ability to go out there and fight 15 minutes. And in this matchup, having that big size advantage, having the youth advantage, having the range and physicality advantage here, I am going to have to pick Kennedy Nzechukwu. The line may be wide, but it's just hard me seeing Barnett going out there and winning this fight. Sure, he land a spinning kick and knock out someone like Nzechukwu, but Nzechukwu is not going to tire out like Collier. He doesn't have the defensive liability that someone like John Violante has, and it is going to be Kennedy Nzechukwu's fight to lose from range. I think he's the better range, better output, better power on the feet as well, and someone who can also use his size to cage push here as well. I think this is Kennedy Nzechukwu's fight to lose, and I do think he's able to go out there with the fight. However, 9.7 on DraftKings is a lot. He's only scored above 100 points a few times, and he's never scored above 115, which is something you want to see from someone at 9.7K. So it's similar to Basharat. I think Nzechukwu has a path to getting these early knockouts, and I do think that a second round knockout scoring 100 is definitely on the table. But I'm not forcing him to lineups. I think there are definitely worlds where he doesn't meet up to his salary, and there's people who are better than him down low. So I'm not forcing him into my lineup. However, I will have some exposure to him in large field tournaments because he does have a clear path to victory and a clear path to victory to score very well. So slight exposure to him up top, not getting to very often, solid cash play. Chris Barnett is a punt play, 6.5K, opens up a lot of options for you, but there are other underdogs I think win more often than him, so not necessarily force him in here. Should be a fun fight. I am picking Kennedy Nzechukwu though. And then next up, Abus Magomedov, 26-6-1 versus the 12-1 Bruno Ferreira, another super fun fight. And if you guys haven't been able to tell already, I'm kind of liking this mid-range for DraftKings builds this week, and especially this fight here. Ferreira, 3-1 inside the UFC. All 4 of those fights ending by first round knockout. Extreme power threat is very violent in his methods out there, and is just looking to swing heavy. He does have very good power in his own right. He's able to knock out some chinnier guys, and has been able to showcase that he does have a lot of energy, is very explosive, and is someone who is definitely a power threat inside the cage. Despite that, there are some issues with him. He is hittable, his cardio hasn't really been tested, his ground game isn't there, and he's pretty undersized for the weight class, but is still a guy you have to look out for because he is so powerful early. He's faced a guy who kind of has a similar mentality about him in Abus Magomedov, and a guy who is very, very dangerous early, but does fade down the stretch. Now, if we were to compare these two, I would say that Bruno Ferreira is probably the better round 1 power threat, but it's not like Abus Magomedov isn't one himself. He had that 30-second knockout, or even less, over Stoltzfus with that front kick there. Is very powerful early on, but also has a pretty solid submission game. He landed 6 takedowns last time against Rolly Alves. Definitely has a more well-rounded skill set, and in a fight like that, he didn't really gas out as much. He was someone who was catapulted to those main events against Sean Strickland, and then fought Kyle Bradley. Has fought a very good level of competition because people have seen him as a pretty good fighter. He's definitely not to that level people saw him as, and his cardio is definitely still a question, but is very explosive early on, good range, and has the ability to grapple there as well. In a matchup like this, I definitely think it's always possible for Ferreira to get that first round knockout. That's his path to victory. It's his style. But I'm going to go with Abus Magomedov here. I think he has more ways of getting it done. I favor his grappling. I think he also has that early power threat. And Ferreira himself has been knocked out, has been chinny. So I think there are multiple paths for Magomedov to get this done, whether it be early power in his own right, whether it be late success, whether it even be the ability to go out here and land some takedowns. I think Abus Magomedov is more well-rounded. I think he's held to a higher regard by the UFC. I mean, someone who was catapulted to stardom so early, put in these main events. I think he is someone who is the A side of this matchup, along with his side, so I do think he gets it done. I'm on Abus Magomedov, and I probably will be playing his money line. I do think he just has more paths getting it done. However, on DraftKings, the fight I want for both sides. Magomedov went out there, scored 105 last time, scored 127 in his debut, has power, has first round knockout upside, has grappling upside. The guy just checks all the boxes, whereas Ferreira has scored phenomenal in the UFC. 110, 116, 109. Phenomenal DraftKings scores because his path to victory is often those first round KOs. So I will be playing both sides, especially the Magomedov side, because I am picking him to win. It should be a fun fight for as long as it lasts. And then we have the 13-1-1 Miktabek Orolbai versus the 19-2 Mateusz Rebecki. Rebecki went out there and fought last on St. Louis card, the one where I was at in person, and I saw him as a huge favorite go out there and kind of drop the ball. He is a guy who has been very explosive. He has a lot of that type 2 muscle fibers, but a guy who definitely didn't live up to the hype. He is undersized for the division, is a very explosive, but has cardio issues the fight goes on, and he was a bit exposed last time against a very dangerous grappler in Diego Ferreira. My TD back Orolbai is someone who has just definitely risen to stardom, right? The guy's name and his demeanor definitely make people laugh a bit, but a guy who has just been insanely good so far in the UFC. Came in on short notice, up a weight class to Eurosmedic. A guy's been on a roll and went out there, landed 7 takedowns, and just mauled him on the mat to a second round submission. And then went out there and beat the highly touted Elvis Brenner in what was an absolute war where he's able to land a lot of takedowns himself. This guy is a very good, strong wrestler who has a good opportunity to win in these clinches, land a ton of danger, and has just a very good squeeze to put people out as well. His cardio is probably his best factor because he's always pushing for takedowns. And although he did slow a bit last time against Brenner, that's Elvis Brenner, a style Rebecki won't really replicate. So in a fight like this, although I think Rebecki is probably too wide an underdog here for his style, I mean, he will go out there throw heavy. I favor his power over someone like Orolbai, and could definitely wrestle early on. As the fight goes, Orolboi's takedown, his pressure, his cardio, his pace will definitely really work over someone like Rebecki who can't really keep up. So I'm on Orolbai. I think there's a ton of takedown upside. His style scores very well on DraftKings. He himself has solid hands that I think could offer Rebecki some problems. But I do think it's a fight that's going to play out in the clinch. A very tired situation for Rebecki where I do think Orolbai takes over. Give me Miktabek Orolbai, and a fighter I love on DraftKings. Averages 115 points at 9.1K, one of my favorite plays in the slate. Him and Fakretdinov with that wrestling upside are definitely people I will be playing this week. I think he's someone whose style of wrestling definitely translates well to DraftKings with that takedown upside, with the finish upside, and that cardio pace pressure he brings. Rebecki, though, is a very interesting option because he himself has been a great DraftKings scorer. 3 wins, 111, 122, 104. And because of that, someone who you kind of want to look at also has a wrestling style pace, has probably first round KO equity. It's probably his path because of how powerful he is and how dangerous he is early on, but definitely a risky play because he will tire as the fight goes. So love this fight. I'm taking Orolbai. Should be a very, very fun fight, but I do think he's able to win in the later rounds, probably getting a later finish in the spot here. And then to the prelim headliner, the 15-6 Jeff Neal versus the 32-16 Rafael Dos Santos. And at first when I saw this matchup, it was one of those spots where I'm like, yeah, that line might be a bit wide, but one where it's definitely going to be tough to watch RDA get older here because he's been a fighter who has definitely been fun to watch, held the interim belt as a guy with a ton of names on his resume, but a guy who's definitely getting up there. I mean, he looked older and slower against Luque and against Gamrot, and he's definitely struggled to go out there and maintain his legendary status, and Jeff Neal is no easy task. But what RDA is at his core is a very good cardio-based striker and wrestler. Like, he's pretty well-rounded in all aspects. He technically wants to go out there and utilize those takedowns, very dangerous from top position, but he can strike a ton of volume on the feet, very good pressure, amazing cardio, and even at 40 years old, we see he still has that. The issue we have here is not only is he 40 years of age, but he's coming up to 170. That didn't really help his wrestling translate to this division here against Luque, and facing a big guy like Jeff Neal, who not only will be taller, longer, but just more physical, I think it's a really tough thing to ask for because on the feet, Jeff Neal has been incredible. Not only does he average 5 strikes per minute, but has been close with Ian Gary, has demolished Luque on the feet, and has just looked really good. The guy also has an 87% takedown defense. So not only is he so good on the feet, he's pretty hard to take down on the ground. Shavkat Rakhmonov struggled with that. He's just a very dangerous fighter. So in the spot here, although I think it's tough to counter a guy like RDA who is going to always be so active, the physicality, the striking, and just the youth and size, someone like Jeff Neal is definitely going to lead him towards being the favorite here, and I do have to pick him to win. Should be a fun fight, but I do favor the striking of Jeff Neal over 15 minutes. DraftKings-wise is another tough one. This whole top range is going to be really tough to get to, and although I just mentioned how much I like Orolbai, Jeff Neal at 9.2 is tough. Yes, he scored 120 against Luque, but only scored 64 against Ponzinibbio. And now against a guy in Naurdiev who has been extremely durable, who is going to go out there and shoot takedowns and probably stifle his style, and just doesn't allow Geoff Neal to have the most upside. Geoff Neal is not going to go out there and land takedowns. He's okay to fight from distance, so unless he's getting a knockout here, he'll probably bust at 9.2K. I prefer Orolbai below him, but he's definitely a pivot play in this top range. Should be a fun fight. I am picking Geoff Neal. Leading off the main card, we have the 14-0 Shara Magomedov versus the 8-3 Armin Petrosyan. Shara, the Bullet, has been a big hype train. One eye, looks like an absolute psychopath. Has been fun to watch, but is a pure kickboxer. And I mean that like kickboxer. He does not throw much hands. He throws kicks from all angles. He's got incredible dexterity, incredible ability to spam kicks and be able to do so for 15 minutes, but does not offer the most outside of that. Not the most grappling, can definitely be stuck on his back. Doesn't even throw the most hands. It definitely keeps his head on the center line, but a guy who is just extremely explosive and dynamic on the feet and is definitely a fan favorite. Armin Petrosyan is also a kickboxer, a guy who came in the UFC and now has fought a pretty good level of competition. He wants to keep it on the feet, has landed over 100 strikes a few times now, and a guy who is also a very good kickboxer, but maybe a different level of style towards the cage here. He doesn't have the same kicking game that Shara does have. He does have good kicks, but he's very good volume, very good pressure, very durable at that as well, and is a guy who will push forward and look to crowd a guy like Shara Magomedov. He's not as pretty because Magomedov's kicks are pretty impressive, but he does have good forward pressure. I think he wins optics better, and I think his durability is on par with Shara Magomedov's to get a very fun striking affair. Now, I think this one's very close. However, I think it's two different styles. It's the moments of Shara versus the minutes of Armin Petrosyan, and to make Petrosyan such a large underdog, I was surprised to see. The way I see this one going is I probably think a bet on Petrosyan's a good look here. He's got the better level of experience. He will crowd the kicker. Shara Magomedov is there to be hit, and I do think Petrosyan can definitely win this fight on the feet, get in the style of fight he wants. But I'm scared to definitely play it here because of not only the judges, but just the guy Shara Magomedov is. He's someone who is favored, someone the UFC wants to succeed. Armin Petrosyan is not in the main card. Shara Magomedov is. So although I probably will end up playing Petrosyan because I do think he has value here, I'm worried Shara Magomedov is going to get a lucky decision because his kicks are pretty appealing and the UFC does love him. So give me Petrosyan in a very close fight. I did pick Petrosyan to get it done though. DraftKings wise, pure kickboxing fight. I do think it goes 15 minutes, so I'm not getting to it too often. However, at 7.6K for someone like Petrosyan, he will have some of my attention just because he's an underdog who I think wins and definitely has volume to go out there and get it done. So not my favorite fight from a stylistic perspective on DraftKings, but I did pick Petrosyan to get it done, so I will play him on DraftKings. And then the 19-1-1 Magomed Ankalaev versus the 14-4 Alexander Rakic. Interesting 205 fight here between the guy who probably should be fighting for the title and Ankalaev versus a guy who has had a pretty good run here in Rakic. A very high level fight between two guys who are pretty good kickboxers, but one where Ankalaev could definitely be the champion right now. He's dangerous. He's very, very well rounded. Solid kickboxing on the feet, but very good wrestling as well. Solid, already great durability. So the guy who just checks all the boxes here and a guy who has been dominant in a lot of these showings. But he's not entertaining. So he's not going out there and getting these title shots because he's just not as fun to watch as other people at this division. Rakic is a pure technical kickboxer, a ton of power in his kick. Like the guy's got some crazy knockouts, but a guy who wants a point fight, a guy who also puts on some pretty boring fights, and a stylistic matchup that's going to make for a very interesting one. If this is a 15-minute pure kickboxing fight, this line is wrong, and Rakic can definitely hold his own out there. But I think the X factor here is the volume of Ankalaev and the ground game. He can get those takedowns, he can land some ground and pound, he can definitely win minutes there. He's just way more well-rounded like a guy in Rakic, and a guy who is just heavily implied to get to the title shot soon. He almost seems inevitable because he is so well-rounded. So I'm picking Ankalaev here. However, I do think in a 15-minute striking affair, the line is wide. I just think Ankalaev has more paths, and because of that, I will choose him. I do think he can get the grappling going here. Because of that, that's where things get very interesting. And he's got more wrestling upside than Neal and Nzechukwu. So at 9.4K, Ankalaev is tempting because if he does get takedowns, he could score very well. The issue is he has not scored over 100 points since 2020. And putting a lot of these lower pace striking affairs definitely doesn't help him score very well. He is very dangerous fighter to go out there and back at this price tag. So I think Ankalaev is my favorite punt GPP play up top because he definitely has a path that people around him may not. However, like the other guys, I'm not cramming them into my DraftKings lineups. I prefer an Orolbai. I prefer a Fakretdinov. So give me Ankalaev. Give me Ankalaev as a pivot play up top. Should be a fun fight. However, I am picking Ankalaev. And I lied. It might not be a fun fight. It could be a boring striking affair. But I hope it's a fun fight. Give me Ankalaev. Next up, 14-0-1 Lerone Murphy, 18-8 Dan Ige. Dan Ige, notorious for that short notice affair. Love the guy. That is super cool to go out there and see a monumental moment at UFC, but a very fun fighter. 50K, has a ton of power in his hands. He's a very good striker, great volume, solid takedown defense, and a guy who's just going to be in that fight 50 minutes. Incredible durability, incredible cardio, is always a threat. Leon Murphy, undefeated, a guy who has been pretty good. Won a main event last time against Barbosa, and I completely understand why he's a favorite here. He's got a very good well-rounded skill set, can wrestle, can have a ton of volume on the feet, and is very technically sound, but the guy's not perfect. And I think if he doesn't go out there and utilize wrestling on a high clip, he's in for a long night. Dan Ige definitely, I think, has the better boxing of the two, has more power in my opinion, and will have the forward pressure. And I think that's how Dan Ige can win this fight, is that forward pressure. The issue has been when Ige loses is because people are taking him down, people are holding him there. People like the Korean Zombie, Bryce Mitchell, Mozart Evloev, like people can hold him down and take him down. I think that's Leon Murphy's path to victory. With that being said, though, I think the line's wide, and I think it should be more like a minus 125 Leon Murphy thing because he has that path to victory and can compete in the striking. So at these odds, give me Dan Ige as a dog. I think the guy's got a ton of power in his hands. I think he's a guy the UFC has definitely likes after his last performance, and a guy who will go out there and be the aggressor with his cardio, with his durability, with the power he has in his hands. I think has the opportunity to go out there and rock Leon Murphy the same way Barbosa did. But I also think he can pressure, land a bunch of shots, and score well optically for the judges' scorecard. So give me Dan Ige in what should be a pretty close affair. Of course, Murphy has the takedown upside, and that could definitely make this lopsided. But I think Ige is live, and because of that, a solid play down low. Definitely a boomer bust play because it doesn't have much wrestling upside. If he doesn't get that knockout, it's typically not scoring very well on DraftKings. But we'll have the volume of the boxing, and at 7.3K, I think wins more than a Leal, Dos Anjos, Rakic, or Hugo, who are below him. Murphy, interesting play, but again, sandwich between Orolbai and Fakretdinov. He's a solid pivot play because he does have wrestling upside, but definitely not a guy enforcing a single entry. Give me Dan Ige in a very, very close fight. Co-main event time, and these are two of the most highly anticipated fights in a long time. I'm really looking forward to these, including the 25-7 Robert Whittaker versus the 13-0 Khamzat Chimaev. Now, I love both these fighters. Have bet on Rob a lot, maybe to my demise sometimes, but I do like the guy. Whereas Chimaev, since he made his way into the UFC, like how do you not like the guy's fighting style? Personality, we won't talk about that, but fighting style, extremely aggressive, all these early finishes. Seems to have this unstoppable wrestling. It's going to be very interesting how he fares against one of the notorious great counter wrestlers here in Robert Whittaker. So I think this fight is pretty simple to break down. The better striker is Robert Whittaker. He is so much crisper, way better volume, way better technique, way better level of experience here, and has shown he can beat these big brutes like the Yoel Romeros or the Paulo Costas. Like Robert Whittaker is so technically sound and will have way better cardio here that he's always a threat to win the judges' scorecards and take over late. But he's got this test he's never seen before in Khamzat Chimaev. It's so hard to prepare for the guy because 2 seconds in, he's going to shoot a blast double, and he's probably going to get you down. His wrestling is unmatched. He is an insane freak of nature, extremely physical, great scrambles, great wrestling, and he was able to go out there and just make Usman look like a fool early on, which no one's really done. Khamzat took him down, he took the back, and just dominated him for the entire first round, and that is something that is no one's ever seen that before. It's hard to replicate, and Khamzat Chimaev just truly is a different freak. So this fight's pretty simple. It's Chimaev early or Whittaker late. That's pretty much what it is. The issue is just how is Whittaker going to survive? How is he going to handle the early onslaught? Now, people have been able to do it. Rob Whittaker is a phenomenal counter wrestler, but as much as I like Rob, and I think he's definitely live here, I'm going to go Chimaev. Robert Whittaker has been blitzed before. I mean, Duplessis landed a trip takedown, pounded him out, has landed those powerful shots, and Khamzat Chimaev's style is something that's going to push the pace on you. He's definitely a better chain wrestler, a different forward pressure than a guy like Yoel Romero, way more explosive, a way tougher stylistic matchup. So I do think Khamzat Chimaev's going to have a ton of opportunities to finish early, and for that reason, I will pick him. But I don't know how this fight's going to go, especially if it gets extended. So, like I said, Chimaev early, Whittaker late. I just favor the physicality of Chimaev early, which is definitely a dangerous connotation. However, give me Chimaev on DraftKings too. One of my favorite plays in the entire slate. Chimaev, Fakretdinov, Orolbai. Some of my favorite combinations. Averages 112 points inside the UFC. In 4 first-round finishes, he scored 122, 127, 117, 103, and that's definitely a style that he can replicate here. He will spam takedowns early. I think his path to victory requires a round 1 or 2 finish, and I think in order to go out there and do that, he's going to score well on DraftKings. So phenomenal ceiling for a guy like Chimaev. I will be playing him. Whittaker also has some exposure too, because as an underdog, 7.5K, if he wins, he's going to be later with volume and technical striking, and definitely is more alive than some people around him. So I'll also play some Whittaker, but picking Chimaev and definitely playing him on DraftKings should be a phenomenal co-main. On to the main event, guys. 26-7 Max Holloway, 15-0 Ilia Topuria. Like I mentioned, I'm a big Holloway guy. Got a Holloway poster right there, wearing the merch. I like the guy, my favorite fighter, and it's a great birthday gift to go out there and be able to go watch him fight. However, I'm scared for him here. Ilia Topuria has been a menace. I'm not the biggest fan of the guy, but it's undeniable how good his power is, how good his wrestling and scrambling can be if he gets it there, and how dangerous of a fighter this guy can be. I picked Volk against him last time, And you can make reason to go out there and pick Max as well. Max has defied the odds before. I bet him against Gaethje. That was phenomenal. Greatest ending to a fight ever. I'm still not over that. But this is a completely different match, but one where I'm kind of scared for. Max Holloway makes his fights by breaking his opponents. He's got some of the most unparalleled volume, has a ton of records for strikes landed, for all this stuff, right? And a guy who looks to break people with how active he is, with how good of pressure he has, and he's a really good boxer. He's the best boxer in the UFC, baby. Come on, we know that, right? And a guy who's been at the top for a while. He's got great range, a very tall fighter, and he is definitely a threat to go out there and win these fights. Ilia Topuria is different, though. He's a guy who will go forward. He's not going to land the same output or volume that Holloway will, but when he throws hard. He knocked out Volk. He's got a ton of power in his hands, dropped him a million times. It is definitely very, very dangerous, but what he also has inside that back pocket is that grappling. He is very explosive, so I do think that he can fade down the stretch, but with the wrestling he has, with the power he has, this is definitely a phenomenal stylistic matchup. Does the unparalleled chin and volume of Holloway take over and help him win this fight down the stretch? Or is just the power of the young El Matador going to be too much? The potential grappling, the potential submission upside? Who knows? And I think because of that, it's a phenomenal matchup. But I can't just say, oh, it's my favorite fighter. I have to give a pick. And gun to my head, if I had to place a bet on this one, I would go with Topuria. I went out there and looked at everything, and of course the line's wide in my opinion. I think Holloway can land a ton of volume. I think he can definitely win the optics, but Topuria is going to have a ton of moment opportunities, right? Land the powerful shots. Holloway's chin is definitely looked phenomenal. I mean, it's unbreakable so far, but he definitely absorbs a lot of damage, and those shots Topuria are going to be hard to eat. But the grappling is what scares me here. Holloway has been taken down, he has been out-scrambled, and Topuria is a phenomenal grappler. He just hasn't had to use it too often. So I think there's definitely a path for Topuria to land takedowns. I think there's definitely a path for Topuria to be on the front foot, landing power shots. And although Holloway has the boxing potential to win over a 25-minute period with volume, with pressure, with better cardio, and with just ability to make reads as the fight goes on, I think it's only fair to make Topuria the favorite, being young, being powerful, being explosive, but a phenomenal matchup here. It breaks my heart to say it, but give me Ilia Topuria if I had to make a pick. However, on DraftKings, Max Holloway, 7.4K, come on. Can you get any better than that? Scored 122 against Gaethje, 153 against Rodriguez, 209 against Calvin Kattar, one of the best DraftKings scorers of all time, 25 minutes to work, a ton of volume, 7.4K. You're going to be the most popular fighter on the slate. I will be playing him. I also think you have to have some Topuria due to potential early submission or KO upside. Someone who scored over 100 points in all his matchups so far. But it's just a phenomenal fight. I'm on both sides on DraftKings, particularly the Holloway side. Like I just mentioned, Holloway, Chimaev, Fakretdinov, Orolbai. It's the core four right there for me on DraftKings. So I love this fight. Cheer for Max Holloway. I'll be watching it nervously because I did pick Ilia Topuria. But what a phenomenal main event, and what a phenomenal card as a whole from Abu Dhabi. That's going to do it for me here on the Plays and Faith YouTube channel. Quickly running through my quick picks. We took Ilia Topuria. I hate to say it. We did. Took Khamzat Chimaev, Dan Ige, Magomedov Ankalaev, Armin Petrosyan, Jeff Neal, Miktabek Orolbai, Abus Magomedov, Kennedy Nzechukwu, Farid Basharat, Renat Fakretdinov, Ibo Aslan, and Bruno Silva. I know there's supposed to be potentially one more fight there. We'll have to see if that gets added. Check me out on Twitter in case I do add that. DraftKings-wise, like I mentioned, core four, Orolbai, Fakretdinov, Chimaev, Holloway. That's what I'll go with. I think up top, if you want to get different, Ankalaev's a good GB playing the mid-range. I will have some exposure to Topuria, and then that mid-range, we're going to make the rest of it. Aslan, Cerquiera, Naurdiev versus Silva, Ferreira, Magomedov. Those three fights are great ways to go out there and build. I think it's going to be a phenomenal slate that way. I lean towards Abus Magomedov, Bruno Silva, and Ibo Aslan, but we'll see how you could go. Underdog-wise, like I said, Holloway would definitely have to get to. Whittaker could have some success late. And then Rebecki is my punt this week if you're not getting to Orolbai. Betting-wise, nothing locked in yet. Might end up on something on Holloway if the line keeps continuing to climbing. We'll probably play Abus Magomedov. And other than that, you'll have to see. Check me out on Twitter, @GamblesGordo. Check me out on CoolBet using code Gordo down below. Should be a phenomenal card. I am looking forward to it. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Hit the like button down below. Subscribe to the channel. Check out Established to Run. I appreciate you guys, and let's make some money.